Welcome to Command Control Power, the longest-running Apple consulting podcast. For over a decade, we've delivered weekly episodes filled with epic tech support stories, troubleshooting insights, discussions about managing clients and businesses, and interviews with industry colleagues and vendors, all tailored for our pro listeners. We also offer exclusive content through Patreon. This private podcast feed is designed specifically for IT professionals, providing valuable advice and guidance on tackling the more complex aspects of running your practice, working with clients and employees, and managing device fleets. With a modest monthly contribution, you'll gain access to a wealth of advanced Apple expertise, meaningful connections, and a community driven by a shared passion for Apple technology. Visit commandcontrolpower.com and click support to learn more. And now, on to the show.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Command Control Power. We are pleased to be joined once again by Michael Thomsen of Origin 84. Thanks for joining us, Michael.
That's great. Thanks for having me again.
All the way from Australia, we've got very minimal latency, all things considered. It's great to have you. We always have to ask you, what day and time is it where you are?
So you're recording on Tuesday night at 5 o'clock, and it's Wednesday, 7 a.m. for me.
Amazing. Wow. Thanks for joining us at this early hour for you. It's very good to join us.
Yes, thank you.
And accommodate our schedules here. So you've done a little bit of a catch-up on our show, and I understand you have a little bit of maybe follow-up and feedback you'd like to bring up. Well, should we start there? What comes to mind first?
Well, I think that the health department needs to put like a warning on your show if you do back-to-back shows as a listener. There's a certain level of sometimes rage that you want to, okay, guys, you got to do this, you've got to do that. And if you listen show after show, it just like builds to a crescendo. But you're the helpless person who can't help the people who you might have the answer for. But I think one was really cool about the water bottles. The water bottle is a pretty popular thing around the place. We see them in the offices that we go to. But I used to work in the snow industry. And one thing when you're in the higher altitudes, you have to stay hydrated.
Yeah.
And the trick was when you're going and you're working on the snow, you can't go necessarily to a bathroom, but electrolytes is the trick. So, Jerry, if you want to stop running to the bathroom, the water going in, if you put the salts back in, then your body stabilizes. So you won't be running to the bathroom quite as frequently. So electrolyte tablets are the trick.
Excellent. These are the actionable tips that our listeners tune in for. It's really
and let me scold you for a second, Michael. No one told you to binge listen to our show. First of all, we actually don't recommend that. For that,
I don't recommend it either. But I didn't know what you'd be talking about, so I had a bit of a break, and I thought I better catch up. And it was good though. But what happens in 6 weeks is quite amazing when you think about you listen to the first show, and then by the time you listen to the sixth show, a lot's happened, and you've unpacked problems. It's just really amazing. It's a good sort of, chronicle of how the technology landscape moves quickly, and particularly when you're talking 6 weeks ago about Apple AI, and then 6 weeks later, you're still talking about Apple AI, but in a totally different tone.
Interesting observation. Thank you for doing the work of listening back to back like that, because you can pick up those trends and hear that where we may not even be aware of it being inside it. But yeah, I imagine we'll still be talking about Apple AI for probably months, if not years to come. Seems to bother me on a daily basis these days. But I did want to ask you both about your day-to-day use of actual intelligence, the ChatGPT for one example. They were pretty much first on the scene in this latest kind of renaissance of the AI tools, and they still have a lot of mind share and a lot of technical abilities. I want to start with a real basic question. How do you both use ChatGPT or whatever your AI tool of choice is for just day-to-day work tasks and things like that? Do you have an app that you like? Do you just use the OpenAI website? I'll just share for one example off the top. I just added the ChatGPT website as a web app to my dock. So it's just as simple as that. I find that makes it more top of mind, easier for me to get to in its own environment there. But I've got to be missing something. Michael, what's your recommendation? And then, of course, I'll love to hear from Jerry, too.
Well, it's pretty broad. And I think from our perspective, we see a lot of AI use within our client base as well. So I suppose I'm very quickly informed about how the landscape shifts based on problems that may arise or like functionality that just arrives that we weren't aware of, and then have to work out how to either implement it, contain it, or just stop it. But to talk about us personally, we have all the flavors. Unfortunately, I think you have to be able to speak with some level of authority over those different products. Gemini, I suppose at the beginning we were saying Copilot was better than Gemini being included in the Google Workspace. Most recently, there's a lot of hype about Google Gemini 2.5, and we've found that to be very strong and capable when it comes to complex tasks such as PowerShell creation. So there's features and benefits, I think, on both, but my muscle memory is to go to ChatGPT. ChatGPT knows my personal tone very well. Then again, I was writing some emails last night, and I wrote them in Apple Mail. I just selected the text, and I just had it proofread with Apple AI, and it actually was quite delicate, I suppose is the right word. So just did the right amount of adjustments to make things coherent. Outside of that, some of our clients are creative agencies, and they're basically replacing photography studios with generative AI for images.
Wow.
So it goes the full spectrum. But day to day, I feel that there is going to be a bit of a battle between how these products just now start to integrate into your day to day. But Google, I would 100% right now say that I feel that Google has a competitive edge because the Gemini inside the Google Workspace, specifically as an admin on the Enterprise Plus plan, you can find security vulnerabilities quite easily because you can just naturally type in a search such as, can you refer me to the file externally shared without any password protection or any sort of login requirement, and it will start to catalog those for you.
Wow.
I can see that this augmenting our capability as admins, but on the other side, obviously the people who are doing the work inside the business, the strength of search across the drives that they have available is going to be very powerful too.
Yeah, it's a great point. And you bring up the level of integration too, and how each major vendor has their own flavor of AI. I've been seeing that as a trend in my client base also, whereas clients used to use a combination of things that grew up organically, like they have Dropbox because they've been using it for years. But some people use Google Docs and then they keep that going a little bit as well. But they're on a Microsoft 365 email hosting plan. And so then they're not using the built-in tools like Teams and OneDrive and SharePoint, et cetera, that are all integrated into the system they're already paying for. So now there's a trend lately to consolidate into that main service. So whether you're in Google Workspace or Microsoft 365, I imagine people are going to be using the built-in tools there, including their flavors of AI, rather than trying to use a piece from here and a piece from there. And that's a great example you gave where Google has the insight into, it has access to learning about what files and how you share them, for one really good example. So that's a great point. And Jerry, are you using, just similar to what Michael's describing, like just the built-in proofreading function? You often share with me and Sam like wording that you've sent to a client that's clearly AI massaged. Do you use ChatGPT for that pretty regularly, or what's your methodology there?
Yeah, exclusively have been using ChatGPT and becoming more and more reliant on it. I might have related most recently, I became a regular subscriber, paying to $20 a month with a personal account. I try to save where I can. So if you have a business email address, they'll charge you $25 for a single seat for a business versus the personal. And the reason why I happily paid the extra money was I was hitting my limit. So you can get most of the features and the functionality with the free account, but then you hit the ceiling where you have to wait for a certain time. But again, I have been using it. I can give you a couple examples. First of all, in ChatGPT, you can customize it. So there is a way to, and what I'm using for ChatGPT is not a web app, but they actually have a downloadable app from the Mac App Store, not using their API, but just logging in with your ChatGPT account. And it's a complete interactive interface. But it's supposed to remember things about you. So I figured, okay, with the paid account, it would remember spelling errors. So I'm writing to this one client called Desiree, and they keep on spelling her name wrong. And I correct them, and they go, oh, okay, gotcha. We're going to make sure that we remember that. And then the next time I send to Desiree, they don't remember. So there's these certain real simple things that they're supposed to do that they're not doing. However, for me, it's a struggle to, especially when it comes to a really complex problem or a procedurally what are the next steps in relating with a client? Okay, we're going to order the equipment. It's going to arrive at my office. We're going to configure it. We're going to send it out to you. So I'll just go into ChatGPT. I'll just do a mind dump and I'll say, rewrite this for me. Just throwing it all out there like a big jumble, and I'll hit return. And within seconds, less than a minute, I've got a completely cohesive, thought out email that's not all over the place. And it saves me tremendous amounts of time. So it's just a win for me. My wife chides me on this and she said, you should develop your writing skills and you should be working on that. I'm like, yeah, okay, but this would take me at least 15 or 20 minutes to put together, and I can do something else with that time. So it's been a godsend for me. The other thing I just shared with you, and Sam, one more point. I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but most recently I got a domain notification from GoDaddy. Unfortunately, I do use GoDaddy for my domains. Shame on me. And it's my primary domain. And so they were saying, oh, your new .com domain renewal was going to be $30 US or something like that. Some really high amount. So I'm like, this is crazy. And I know that GoDaddy has a domain buyers club that you can join for, I think, $120 a year. They have a basic and then a premium one for people who just like squat on domains, pretty much. So I did an export. Yeah, I did an export because I have 28 domains, mostly centered around my business, and also some that I'm keeping in reserve just in case Apple decides that they're going to do they own the word MacWorks. So at any point they could pull that rug out from under me and MacWorks would have to go away. And I'd be a big boy about it, but that's the fact of life. I've got these 28 domains like MacWorks Connecticut, support Connecticut, Apple support Connecticut. And I did a CSV export. I just uploaded it to ChatGPT and I said, take a look at the Domain Buyers Club from GoDaddy and see how much money it would save me with these domain renewals if I joined the Domain Buyers Club. And so it took a few more minutes for it to do that, but it actually said, if you join the Domain Buyers Club today and make sure that all these domains are moved in, you're going to save right off the bat $250 on renewals, over the course of a year. And then it said, would you like me, and it offered this out of the blue, would you like me to create reminders for you for 2026 so that you make sure that those domains get moved into the Domain Buyers Club as well? And I'm like, yes, please.
Yeah.
So it did an Apple script, and I ran the Apple script, and it just put them in my calendar.
Oh, wow.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty amazing. Yeah. I love these real world examples. Yeah, it's another great example. And Michael, you were one of the first to bring this into my mind, like 2 years ago, probably, or a year and a half ago, when we did our Apple consulting survey, basically. We sent out a survey to our listeners. We got back a lot of results. I had to figure out how to collate those into answers that made sense that we could report back to our listeners. And I think your comment was something like, if you're not using ChatGPT or a similar service to take a bunch of info like this and then process it for you, think about it and report back to you, like you're basically wasting your time. And Jerry's recent example that he shared with us privately and just now brought that to mind. So can you give an example along those lines of, okay, I took, I don't know what it would be, a Google Sheet, or just here's a link to the results in Google and tell me something about, share an insight about these results? Could you literally ask a question like that?
Yeah, I suppose using it on a day-to-day basis, some of the things that I'll do, I'll flesh out a process, a couple of words, a couple of key things that the process has to have, get the model to expand it. And then usually there's a task at the end where we might need to create like a table for someone to complete. So you might be talking about, if you've got user groups, what SharePoints might they have access to, for example, like very small sort of task. But what we do is we just ask it to create the table, export it as a sheet, and it's done. Now, that's not processing the data. That's just to get the data. Then when you get that data and a person who's completed this at the client side, it's like, okay, we have a range of people types. We've got a creative person, an accounts person, we've got a manager. They'll then say, I want them in this group, that group, this group, that group. And usually it's incoherent because they just sit thinking about it. They're not aware of all the groups that they've got. That's where I find it's really powerful, because you just say, straighten this out. But you can use some natural language like that and just straighten this out. And it's okay, this is the summary of the person type. And then our team can have that as a sort of a persona of what the person is. If you're a creative person, this company starts, that's what we have, and then we can just map it out very easily. So I think we do very like sophisticated stuff with it. So another example is at the further end of that is that we had a calendar sharing request from one of our clients. Now, if you're doing Microsoft 365 and you understand calendar sharing, calendars, I have a big grievance with calendars just in general. It's the most antiquated part of any productivity suite. But Microsoft particularly have problems where if you want to start sharing calendars and you want to use the big button that says share all calendars with all people, things like that just don't work. And they might work once, they don't work in a persistence basis. Client's request was we want to have all calendars open to all people, and all new people who come on board also have to have calendars open to all people. Now, I do question why they want to do that, but I don't die on a hill over it. There's usually two reasons why. It's either they want to make sure that things are efficient or they don't trust their team. But there's a balance there. Anyway, that's their business. But what we needed to do is go, you've never actually taken your previous staff members who we've offboarded, we never deleted their accounts. And so you have a list of ex-staff members. And I think you probably know this. It's just in case, we'll make it a shared mailbox and we've got it for later. So when you start to open calendars up and these people don't work there anymore, you're going to open up previous people's calendars who don't have a chance to make events private. And so there's a confidentiality issue there.
Oh, interesting.
So the simple answer from the client's perspective is, how about you just delete the calendar entries? And we can go in and do that. But every single calendar entry will decline the meeting. And so do you really want that? Yep. Internally, externally, everyone's declined my meeting. Person's probably either no longer there, works at a competitor. That's not cool. We had to really think about this problem more and more. To cut to the chase, Gemini was the answer there, and Victor, who's on our team, who nutted this out, just iteratively worked through all of these if-this statements that he had, but they were natural. So if they were an ex-staff member, we can't do this to that. And it just ultimately generated this beautiful, very long, but sequential script that we run, and it's just worked a treat. Now, it's prototyping. It's just like doing it yourself. You have to try it. Okay, that didn't work. You have to know what you're doing. But the syntax, that's really important, that the syntax is right, and that's what it's getting. And we've never seen that so consistent in a sort of a mainstream model than what it is in Gemini right now. So I'm not an Apple advocate for AI or Google. It's just, I'll take which one works. And right now, that is the one that I feel is working the best. But I will just quickly say, products like Notebook LM, where you actually put the information that you want into the learning model that it's trained, you're training it on just that data, that would be where, Jerry, you'd find that there'd be some success with what you're saying with naming and how and why, because it's only going to be working off that data. And then the other thing in ChatGPT is creating I think they're projects. I can't remember what they're called. But if you create a project, you just start at the beginning of your quest, like from information in this project, and then it knows the references only the things that you've talked about in that sort of project folder. And so learning how, I suppose this is the key thing, learning how to navigate search or generate prompts in AI that is the new. We used to say he who Googles fastest wins. Now it's like he who commands AI better wins, and that's the key. So looking out for tricks. So if it's hallucinating, and I think that's a really key part. Process development, for example, with Jerry, you're saying like, I want to build a process. Sometimes it makes a process that's 8 times longer than it needs to be for a 2-step process. And it's just creating things and bringing stuff in from everywhere. And it's like, this is not relevant. You can actually ask the prompt to not hallucinate. And I was only taught this last week, and I'm just like, oh, that's cool. So what it's doing is just don't dream shit up, and bring it in. Just don't hallucinate. Yeah, so...
Isn't it interesting that we have to ask, though? Jerry gave this example recently where, I forget what the example was, but something along the lines of, said this, and it told me the answer, and then I had to tell it, like, no, you're totally wrong. You just made that up. And it's, oh, thank you. Yeah, you're right. Like, silly me. It's just this weird dynamic to have to coach the thing to do what you want, and just to have to include something as basic as don't hallucinate. What's the threshold there? Like, they need to maybe tweak that on the back end where it's just like, just don't hallucinate at all. Is there a benefit to hallucinating to some degree? What's the right secret sauce there? Like, why do we have to ask is my question.
Adam Engst had the angle. What was it? That ChatGPT was a grader, like something like a year 8 student, and that's true. It behaves like a year 8 student. If you chastise a kid who's 14 because they've given you the wrong answer, they'll be like, "Oh, I'm sorry." It almost actually has the persona of a year 8 child.
So, really
and so, yeah, look, I don't know. I think these are mass market products too. So you have to remember there are lots of people who aren't that intelligent who become a little bit more intelligent because of maybe being able to collate information this way. But anyone that has, to Jerry's wife's point, writing skills, anyone who has analytical skills, you can see it a mile off when it's been AI generated. And the actual craft, I feel, is to work out how to take something that has started off with very limited personal input, churn it through to make it actually sound like you and not look anywhere like AI. And that's still hard to do.
Yeah. You still have to have the underlying ability to craft a sentence and have a voice in your communication. And Michael, you mentioned earlier, it learns to sound like you to some degree. So do you find that just happens naturally from using ChatGPT and just being signed into your account, maybe dumping in some emails and things and like in your coaching of the bot? Or do you have to like specify things manually to help it like sound like you?
I have a localization problem where everything has the letter Z. And I say, look, write in Australian English. And then it gets to a point where it sounds a little bit too analytical or a little bit too something. I say, rewrite in the tone of Michael Thomsen. And it knows my tone. And if I want to throw it to a little bit more regional Australian, you can tell it to do that. And it'll throw in a couple of Australianisms. So I think crafting that through, I found that this, to Jerry's point, it's not that good at remembering. But the factor here is this is generative AI. So we have to understand what this actually means. So if, for example, we go to illustrations, and illustrations is probably an easier example than words. If you put an image into an AI tool and you say, do this to it, and it might be like, here's a sunset, and you want to add a filter, and you want to have it put a sailing boat in the background, and you go, this was awesome. This is just what I want. I want this to be forever. And every time I do it, I want it the same. Can't do it. Every time is the next time. So there is a misunderstanding somehow between running a process such as a workflow across an image versus using AI to generate one after the other. And so,
it's not deterministic. AI is not deterministic, whereas like running a Photoshop process or a workflow or whatever is. You're going to take the same starting image, run a series of tools, and get the same result every time. But to your point, maybe the hallucination is what makes it non-deterministic and somewhat creative, and maybe that's the balance they're trying to find.
Yeah, and knowing when to get out. So when you've got a reasonably close answer, don't keep trying to get it to perfect. Just stop, take what thing that was closest, put it back into a new chat, and just start on that.
I want to actually bring in some feedback from Adam Rice in the chat where he mentions this point. In a long conversation, you can get to a point where it loses context. But if you feel like you've achieved some understanding and like you're at a point where you want to then build from there, he'll stop and he'll say, summarize what we're doing in a way I can use as a new prompt. So basically you let it feed back to you. Here's like how to get back to this point efficiently, copy and paste that into a new prompt and basically start fresh from that point. So you lose a lot of that baggage where now it starts to include things from earlier that were actually like a dead end or that kind of thing. You can just, start fresh. I love that idea.
Another example of this was I was having ChatGPT create a form for me. And it progressed, as Michael said, after a while, you have to stop and maybe do a new prompt with it because it started to get worse and worse. So every time it would generate a new Word document for me, and it can do that for you. It's so powerful. You could say, make this a downloadable PDF in letter size or whatever. But this particular exercise I was doing, it just got worse and worse with the formatting. It was like much better right in the beginning. It had the essence of what I was looking for and lost it along the way.
Interesting. Any techniques for that, Michael?
Just go, you just have to know when to stop. I think it's actually just it's like maybe a life skill, right? It's like you need to know when to fold them.
Right.
Or it's like I'm not a chef, but chefs do this, right? Where they start taking the dish and they start adding too many ingredients to it, and all of a sudden it takes this hard left turn and it goes bad really quickly.
I do have something else to add, just to bring it back to consulting, which is we do have a responsibility to be not experts on this, but at least good shepherds when it say this is where we need to go with this, stay away from that. What was very interesting was when Apple did release 15.3 and all of a sudden, kapow, we have AI in every computer. So in Australia, we have standardized student testing. So each year, grade 7 and grade 9, I think it is, they do standardized testing. What people weren't aware is because people bring their own computers to school, all of a sudden, there's kids with AI in the actual computer. So in a secure browser, even though it's in a secure browser, AI was still allowed into there because of the system-wide nature of it, rather than it being a extension or something like that. And so all of a sudden, some people have got AI support in these standardized tests. And it's just, this problem is everywhere. And
interesting.
We're working with clients to firstly explain to them, look, there's AI in your computer, whether you know about it or you don't. We can turn it off with fully managed control if that's what you would like. But more the point, how many AIs do people cross over during their standard business day? And so we have done a couple of sort of knowledge-based style articles. They're not fully technical. They're not going to be research papers by any stretch. But what they're saying is, this is where people will bump into it. You need to have a policy around this. If people are using it, the best thing to do is get in front of it and say, look, how are you using it? Maybe it can benefit your business more widely if people are, but please ask. And then the other side of that is please pay. So don't do things for free, because if you're doing it for free, like we've said with Gmail, for the longest time, you are the product. And ChatGPT, you need to get to the Teams plan or the business plan where you're paying money before they actually start to say, we won't train the model off your information. And where this becomes really important, and the example I can give is, if you had a new basketball franchise opening up and people knew that the franchise was starting, but they hadn't named a coach. If someone working for the franchise was trying to create a press release and they put in the person who is the coach about to be appointed name, you have a very interesting, narrow piece of information that doesn't really exist anywhere else. And because that is unique, it may return somewhere else as an answer to a question. And so it wouldn't happen with Google because it wasn't published. But in a model environment like that, it's trying to be as smart as possible. And so this isn't validated, but I think this is the actual answer, so I'll put it in there. And then all of a sudden, you've got some clickbait, right? Someone creates an article saying that this person's the new to be appointed coach of this. And just so we're very bullish on saying you're allowed to use it, you have to pay for it. And if then you want to turn around and go and you don't want to use it, then we have to also pay for it in some ways to contain it, because you can't stop people from using it too much without claiming domains and so forth. Yeah, I think Anush from Advisory also he shared a sort of an article on AI in the Mac admins at some point in time. I saw that's his reference to his clients. I'll have a look at the ones that we've got. I'm happy to share them with you if they're not too sensitive. But we also said with 15.3, we didn't send out a pre-release advisory. We didn't say, hey, everybody, Apple's coming out with Apple Intelligence. This is what it's all about. Because
be afraid. Yeah.
I was more like, I don't trust that the implementation matches the documentation, and usual, that's true, it didn't. And so we're releasing this advisory now because you're now seeing this is what you're seeing. Contact us once you see it if you have any concerns. And so we can all use these as opportunities to contact our clients, to give consulting and advice. I don't really want to tell people how to do their jobs with AI, but I certainly want to make sure that they know that their staff needs to have a policy around AI, which is different to cybersecurity, because they are going to be versioned quickly and differently. Staff need to agree and understand, because the amount of data leakage, and this is where I'm living my life at the moment in compliance and certification for ISO 27001, data leakage is just the biggest problem, because for years and years, we just trusted that staff would do it. But now there's so many malicious automated bad actors out there. We have to try and work out how to contain it, but not have people stop doing their jobs effectively.
Yeah, that's the balance here, is that these tools can be very effective and can be a force multiplier for people, especially really at all levels. But on the lowest level, you can have someone who doesn't have very much writing ability who's able to communicate with the public, with clients, whatever, where they weren't able to as effectively before. So it can empower employees. And so you want to enable employees to seize that power. But also, to your point, there's a huge risk of data leakage. And I love this example of an unreleased announcement that's being prepared in the maybe week or so leading up to a big public announcement, where if you're using these tools to prepare that material, that information may not exist anywhere else other than in this tool. And that tool gets really clever and might report this learned knowledge to someone else who doesn't have access to that proprietary information. Having examples like that are really important. I've gone a really long way training clients into thinking about security through the example of credential stuffing and how you can have a breach that then ends up where your password may be from 5 years ago. You don't use it that often anymore, but the fact is it was there and it has leaked, and now hackers have tools that they can use to use credential stuffing to basically get back a list of your accounts that still use that password. And so you might not have had that mental model. Like you might have thought, no one's going to think my dog's name and the year we got married. Who's going to know that? It's not about that. It's about the possibility of a leak that affects all of your accounts. And they have a breakthrough about that. So if you can give them the example of a basketball team or make up your own example that speaks to your client, that goes a long way to helping them understand the problem. So how would you then address that problem? Because they might say, I do want employees to be able to use AI. Is it a training problem? Like they need to understand not to put proprietary info into the model, but to maybe pull out that little bit and use it as put in a placeholder instead of the coach's name, Mr. Smith, instead of Mr. So-and-so.
The answer to that is that's where you go between doing someone's job for them and providing a tool set for them to do their job. So I balance this very carefully. The answer from a consultant side is that you need to have more eyes on more data points across the user's experience, both on a device and online. So where we get to there is the policy can say don't do it. Now, we've had policies in place for years. People follow them. People don't get some kind of warning and then they get fired if that's what happens. But the damage is done, right? If the policy is not followed for reputation or to data leakage. So the policy has to exist. And I think just at a really high level, one thing I'd like to mention is that everything we do, that we decide in our businesses to do in a process, is governed by a policy. That could be your ethical policy. It could be a set of rules that you want to do technology by. But the sooner those policies are documented, and even if they're documented flimsily, at least they're a North Star to go to. And I say that all the time, whereas if we put some controls in place, the why is the most important, because if the people don't understand the why, then the control feels like a little bit inhibitive. But also if the control is not defined by the policy, then I don't know which way to zig and zag as things move in time. So with all of these things, we can go into a client and say, what's your vibe? Cool. Your vibe is you don't care. Great. We'll care a little bit. But if it goes wrong, you said you didn't care. Or the other type of person is that you want to lock it down really tight. And we're like, we can't. So we can lock it down here and we can show you this. So a good example is if you're using Microsoft as a tool set. So, at the base level, you can get yourself to Business Premium, which I think should be the standard that most people who are using Microsoft as their productivity platform are using, because it gives you the sort of best balance of tools for price. But then you go, okay, how are we matching the data on the email to the data that's happening, the traffic that's on the computer? So from DNS, for example. Defender from Microsoft is there, right? So you can buy Defender, you can put it on the device, you can get some analytics from that. And so straight away, you can start to get 2 data points on what's going on. Then, further and further you go, you can get SaaS application analytics if you go to an E5 license. And so I know that this is all Microsoft centric, but it can be done with other tools if you're using Google as your primary or whatever. But the Microsoft ecosystem shows a pathway, a very generic pathway of how to do it. So you follow their tiers of product and you start to see the more data points you get, the more ability you have to contain. We've talked about CM in the past to capture all those logs. That's really important, because if we're not using a CM to put the logs in one place, you can't cross-reference the places that people are having those activities. So our view is this, which is we try and see what the people are doing on the device as best as we possibly can through analytics. We can get aggregated reports to say, we see traffic going to Dropbox, Box.com, WeTransfer, you send it, whatever it is. But you see the traffic going to ChatGPT, you send it, and so on and so forth. So when you start to just get aggregate reports like that, and the number of people sending traffic to these destinations, the business has to be shown that. And that's where the conversation starts, because I can keep coming back month after month and banging the drum on, we need to contain this, we need to do better. But until they see the report where it's spiking and all of a sudden people are using this very heavily, that's where people get a little bit like, oh, we better do something. And that's where they pay for the enterprise plan, but they're doing it in a really knee-jerk way because they're just reacting to that data that you're showing. So I know I've missed the actual question, but the way I'm getting there is saying you have to, this is just a small component of the bigger whole, because token hijacking in sessions, that it's a very common thing that we're now starting to see. And it's the same thing. It is, we can't stop it from happening unless we have more data points. And the only thing we can do in between now and having those data points is just say, look, if it's a link saying that you want to join a SharePoint from an external company, please don't click on it.
Yeah.
And so we have to do both sides of the field.
Yeah, it feels overall like a moving target to me again. For a number of years, it felt like I had more of a handle on best practices for security. And of late, it's feeling, man, I need to double down on understanding some of this stuff, because I'm still finding, even with MFA in Microsoft 365, users are getting phished. They're falling prey to those man-in-the-middle attacks, and they're having their sessions hijacked in one way or another, where then their accounts are being used to send out spam solicitations to all their colleagues. And sometimes we hear about it because we receive one of those and then we intervene and contact them. But it feels, wow, that's pretty late in the process if I'm only hearing about it, luckily, because I was CC'd on something like a phishing attempt from one of my clients. And this is just a whole new, maybe less so security, more so privacy implication. But again, rapidly changing field here where, like you said, vendors are building it right in, whether to their platform like Apple or to their online portals and things as well. So yeah, staying ahead of it is really tricky, and knowing what to do. Okay, we see a spike of traffic to OpenAI's servers. Looks like your marketing department is getting pretty heavily into AI tools. Do we need to have a conference call where we can do some training and best practices? Because fundamentally, to your point, it comes down to user training. There's only so much you can do to lock any of this down, and people just have to be savvy enough to understand what's a good use of technology, where to be extra careful, and how to be alert to these scams that are coming in at the same time. Yeah, it's a complex field that we're in, and it's changing very rapidly once again.
And I'm no technical genius. Like, I'm just a logic-based person. It just doesn't logically make sense to let people have the door open or give people the keys. Yeah. The technical solve on some of this is sometimes going to evolve and be there given to us over time. So I don't try and solve the technical problem if there is no easy technical answer, because you just have to wait. But what I've also had to start saying to people is that if you've got a good security posture today and you don't do anything, then you're wrapped. Like, it's almost like health in a video game, right? So if you don't sustain yourself in the game, you're going to lose power just by existing. And so you have to keep feeding yourself with knowledge and arming yourself with new things and harvesting that. You've got to power up every little while. But I think right now, between 2022 and right now, what was theoretical and like maybe a desktop exercise for a security team is now here. And I had a conversation yesterday where I said to someone, they were like, why is this like this? Why are we still fighting this security thing? I'm like, you don't get Viagra ads anymore because we dealt with that. We know how to deal with Viagra ads, right? And we don't get this type of attack very much anymore because we know how to deal with that. But this is a battle now. And AI, going back to AI is helping both teams, red and blue, on this one, because as much as we can fight it with AI is iterating this to make it harder and harder to catch. I think that AI ultimately is dystopian, but that's that's a totally other conversation with
I would love to dig into that. Maybe that's a part 2 or just a private conversation at ACES. But yeah, because it seems like any tool that advances technology quickly enough is seized on by the bad guys as quickly, if not more. And there's such an incentive to do bad things for whatever like easy, quick profit that those people will spend the time to learn the tool really well and then up their game in terms of like the success of their phishing campaigns, even at something as simple as that. Because I've been saying for years, what's saving us from a lot of these is the fact that they're poorly written, they have problems in graphics and things like that, and they're just not sophisticated in many cases. But AI can just take a really unsophisticated phishing campaign and make it look great, and it's going to affect 10 times the number of people. So something as just simple as that is a hard enough problem to solve. Let's go back to some positive uses of AI, though, because Adam had contributed quite a bit in the chat here, and I want to highlight some of it. Something as simple as he's a lot more confident dealing with Windows using ChatGPT. That's super helpful, I think, to me as a guy who very rarely touches Windows. So that's an easy, basic one. But I love this idea of using like an AI tool. So whether it's ChatGPT kind of post facto, or a lot of them are integrated like Otter.ai, and I'm sure there's a bunch of others now, where they can actually listen into your audio of your Zoom session and then take the transcript. Of course, that's useful enough as it is just to have that, but then to transform that transcript into a summary for the client. So you can ask for that. Shorter notes that go in your ticketing system, for example. So I think I hadn't even thought of that. Yes, I understand I can have a raw transcript, but to actually then take the transcript and make my client notes from it, that's a brilliant idea that will save me a ton of time, potentially. And then lastly, he says it's great for catching I'll send you the link, and maybe you forgot to actually note that in your ticket live. It'll remind you of that. It's brilliant stuff. So anything to play off of those so far?
Specifically for me, and what he was saying with Windows, we're deploying this QuickBooks headless server on a PC, and we're in multi-user mode. And there's just some basic things where I don't know QuickBooks for the Windows platform intimately. I use it for my own accounting on my Mac. So multi-user mode, how do I create a new template? I just put all these questions in this ChatGPT. I don't have to go to the QuickBooks knowledge base, do a search. It just gives me this information. And if it's not exactly accurate, it's close enough to the mark where I can figure out where to go and how to navigate. And then another thing that just came to mind that was happening to me the other day, I'm cleaning out the basement. And Joe, you inspired me about a couple of months back. You went to your old office and closed that down, and you put a lot of pieces of old technology that you really didn't think you'd be able to move at all and just send it to I know you wouldn't send it to a landfill, but responsibly dispose of it. And Joe was throwing stuff on eBay. So I very quickly pulled some things from the basement, and I went into ChatGPT and I said, give me a very nice HTML formatted description of this product. Just gave it the name of the product. And I said, make sure that it's clear that I'm not a dealer, that this is coming from a person rather than somebody who's just fencing equipment all the time. And within seconds, again, HTML code. And I had these ads running really quickly. Whereas before, that was the most tedious task for me, was making sure it looked good in eBay so I'd get some traction on it. So just so many different uses that I'm just now exploring and finding even more.
Amazing.
Yeah, similarly, we've found that those like long format things being condensed down to short format is the killer feature from meetings mainly. Our account management process is effectively driven by Teams, recorded meetings, Copilot, and then we use Halo PSA as the primary source of all the information that we have on our clients. And so from that, our account manager can record the meeting, put the prompt in. It will summarize the meeting enough for him to then get the actions. But the actions are not just here's an action for you. It's here's an action, but in the format to put it into effectively a ticket task underneath that client's work in progress call. And so from there, he can then run tickets inside the sort of the life cycle of the client's account management. And if he wants to then spin a ticket out to get some help from a support team member, he can then launch another ticket from there. But everything is now becoming a ticket. And you talk about CRM and you talk about how to engage with clients and those kinds of things. I think the main thing is that you edit out the things that are unimportant, because there's a lot of noise and the signal to noise ratio needs to improve for us to be efficient. And so making sure you are really clear on what is coming through, what has been dealt with before. And when you're doing, and Teams, I can talk to Teams, but with Copilot in Teams, like we have the same meeting invitation for our weekly or fortnightly or monthly calls with our clients. The best thing about that is that it knows what happened in the previous call. Like, just like with ChatGPT, it knows what's happened.
Wow.
So when points get raised in a meeting, or we have to make a meeting summary before the meeting goes ahead, we can kind of just curate that very quickly and look like we're ahead of the game by sending an agenda. And clients, there's only one client that I have who sends an agenda in advance of a meeting. And the agenda that they send is literally their agenda. It's what they want to get out of it, or it's what they want to grieve about. But when we send out the agenda, it's always about, here's a thing that we discussed that we need to sign off because we've finished it, or here is a thing that we didn't get through properly in the last call, or here's a problem that came up in the week between now and then. So I think, again, it is just a tool to give you the condensed or the information to put somewhere else, because you can't keep the information in ChatGPT. You can't really keep it in like Notebook LM even. You have to still put it somewhere else. And burying the good work that AI can do somewhere that can't be utilized is equally as wasteful as just not running it in the first place. The opportunity cost.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's terrific.
Man, I feel like I'm doing this such a manual way. I've been doing this for 20 years of, as I'm talking to the client on the phone, I'm making my notes, or I'm thinking about it after the call and I'm documenting, and I'm doing that for myself. I have my notes that go out to the client on the invoice. I have my follow-ups noted there. I have some internal notes about references I use that I might want to look at again or whatever, all manual. And I imagine if one of these services were just listening to my phone call, how accurately do you think they would pick up on the signal and leave out the noise in this kind of scenario? Does it work pretty effectively for you, Michael? It sounds like it does.
I think it would. Yeah, I think it would work really well. The calls themselves, if you're doing, I don't know how you're doing your support calls, the call itself is only as good as the phrasing of the people in the call. So we're very good in Teams, for example. We call into a meeting when we're in the room with clients because we need to get at least one recording of the meeting, so we've got that. When we're doing a remote call, it's even better because it knows who is speaking.
Two sides,
right? Yeah. And so it says Michael said this, and Joe said that, and Jerry said this, and so then it can do better to assign. I said I will do it, so it's like assign task to Michael.
Wow.
Again, there's lots of nuances there about understanding how to get the best out of the tool. But for example, ticket standards. What do you want to see in a ticket when you give a client a response? Now, you're handcrafting every ticket response by the sound of it. You might have some canned texts there. You might put some stuff in there.
I do.
But realistically, if I said to you generically a ticket standard of, I want you to put 3 lines of text into a ticket for every 15 minutes that you are billing for the ticket. I don't think it's overly burdensome to give someone like 3, if you do 45 minutes, they get 3 short paragraphs of what was done. You can write that yourself, or you can actually do what I usually get from a support person is, I logged in, reset password, checked it worked, done.
Yep.
That's 4 words, 5, 8 words maybe. Put that into some kind of framework that knows the model, and it knows that I did 15 minutes, I need 3 lines of text. So I did these things, took me 45 minutes, give me some results, paste it into the ticket, send it, forget about it. The only reason we put the notes in the ticket generally is to remind ourselves if there's something in the future that comes up, or if there's a billing inquiry. The person reading the ticket doesn't care about the response because their problem's been solved and they've moved on.
Yeah.
We've just got to make sure that we've internally got the right level of information for the future for other team members. And then even more importantly, the future justification of what do you do for us? And by creating those longer format, worded, expanded notes, you look like a boss.
Yeah.
And it's about making the level 1 person look like a boss.
Yeah. For anyone starting out there today, clearly this is the way to go, is to like start with a ticketing system, start with integrated large language models, some form of AI in your call from day one, and just have it be consistently in every call. Of course, newer people are probably less concerned about privacy because all of that has the caveat that, yeah, you're adding ChatGPT to every single call. So they're listening to every call. But it seems like you get a lot of power out of that I've had to create manually from the start. I've just handcrafted every word since the beginning. And it's taken a lot of time, and I'm fast at it, relatively speaking. But to not have to even do that, to have that be done for me, and then I could just read through it and say, oh, missed this one little detail that I definitely want to include, but the rest is 90% of the way there. That's a huge tool for someone starting out.
And I'll probably just finish with one thing that is commonly happening to us. AI can battle with AI until forever because they don't fatigue. So what we don't do is we don't allow external parties to do note-taking in meetings that our team members are in, unless we record the meeting and it's our note-taking. Now, that's our policy. So why we do that? Too many times do you have a meeting and someone's got Otter AI running in the background, and then they do a summary, and then they send you an email 45 minutes after the meeting is finished, and you're still having a coffee and just unwinding from it. And here are all the tasks that you have from this meeting. And I'm like,
I'm not ready for those tasks yet. Yeah.
Firstly, no, wrong. These are not the tasks. Secondly,
right, too, yeah.
I don't work at your pleasure. Like, we are professionals and we're not janitors. We need to go through and work out what's what. Right. And so, yeah, we very much craft team member behavior to go, if there's a note taker in here, you say at the beginning something along the lines of, I appreciate you taking notes, but anything that we talk about in this meeting, we will send you whatever from that after the call. So it's at the start, you say it out loud, you're not necessarily consenting to it, but you're certainly not consenting to them throwing it back at you and saying, you said this. It's almost like saying the thoughts and opinions of the person in the call don't represent the business, because they weren't prepared to be put on the spot and recorded forever.
Interesting.
In this situation, I know that this will be recorded and it is forever, and so we'll
take responsibility for that. Yeah. Yeah. So
let me interject here for a second, Joe. I'm just grinning like a chimp here. Michael has this way of speaking. I would love to just be your shadow for a week, because it's the way you present your material. I've told you this before live on the show, that you're extremely intelligent, methodical, but some of the things you come out with are just beautiful. I don't work at the pleasure of you, and I'm not your janitor. I mean, I love that.
I'm sure I'm going to be hearing you use that one with clients now, Jerry. That's a perfect one for you to steal.
It's fantastic.
I'm not a janitor is a great line. I'm a professional. I'm not a janitor. Yeah, I love this concept of the battling AI, like AI battling each other, and they never fatigue. It reminds me of this is ancient history. When the iPhone came out in 2007, and even prior to that, we had Blackberries and Trios. The people that had a mobile device that could do email had a huge point of leverage against everyone else, because they were able to do email throughout the day in bits and pieces as things came in. And so it was this sort of like asymmetric response. You sit down at your computer and you send 10 emails, okay? And that's your email session for the day. And all those different people are getting those emails from you. Maybe I get 2 of those emails. If I can quickly respond from my phone anywhere in the world, then I don't have to, you're not waiting for me to sit down later at my desk and respond. And so my ability to do email is outsized compared to your ability to do email. And so I'm going to more quickly do email, and that's going to be a point of leverage, because I'm not going to have the same burden that everyone else has in doing email in sessions in front of their computer screen. That went away as soon as everyone had iPhones. Now it's just all it did was create more email for everyone, because it's just so much easier to send a half-written email and misspellings and whatever else. That's now we have a burden to have to interpret. And so if you allow everyone's AI to be pointed back at you, and now it's like a similar situation where if your clients are taking advantage of AI more quickly than you are, you're going to be left behind in a certain way where now they're assigning tasks to you because it's all too easy for them to do that. They're following up more quickly. They're responding quickly to every email and request. And so if you're not leveraging the same tools to work as efficiently, if not more so than they are, yeah, that has a weird effect of putting an undue burden on you. So we're in the early days still to some degree of this AI revolution. And I like this policy of saying, preempting their maybe standard process of including their AI and having an outcome from the meeting and assigning tasks, and instead just doing that right from the beginning and making that your policy. You're a professional. They're hiring you. You can have whatever policy you want.
Yeah, and just you don't know where that goes. Again, you don't know whether it's free, whether it's paid. Why? And a lot of people are doing this because it's there. They're not actually doing anything with it. I get notifications 6 months after a recording expires from a Teams call that we recorded. I don't care. It could delete it after 3 days. Once we've had the meeting and like that bit of note taking is done, I don't need to go through that meeting and see any of it. But so we also just have to ask the question why. And ultimately, I think that the skill that we have as consultants, and I think that I'm going to raise my usual gripe and say, if you're a true consultant and you're not a managed service provider, and I feel that, what the two of you are doing is consulting and not managed service providing, you will be more profitable and you will have less chance of things going sideways because you are still engaging at a strategic and personal level with the decision makers and the individuals that you're supporting. I think where the scalability, and you'll see this in all of the MSP products that are out there in the marketplace right now to support MSPs to grow and scale. Right? I see it all the time. And a lot of them are trying to use AI and they're using it so that they don't have to do real work. And ultimately, the person who's got the problem isn't the AI. The person that has a problem is a human with a problem and they need to get it done. And that boss is on their tail to make sure it's fixed or the work that they need to do is done. And an AI sending them some random KB article that it thinks is relevant to stall the process of responding to an SLA within a period of time just creates dissatisfaction. And so there is a balance to find in your own business between the hand roll and like the automation, but the human piece is the most important piece. So if a ticket comes in, our policy is if you can't actually solve it within like the ticket information that's been provided. So like a change request for a user account it doesn't need a phone call. But if it's a support request and you can't nail it with the first ticket response in an email and you're going to need to find out more information, I expect a phone call to the person. Even if the person doesn't answer, at least they have a missed call from Origin 84 and you can leave them a voicemail and you can follow up in the ticket saying, hi, I just tried to call you. And that shows that you are real. And if you want to add dollars to things, automations are invaluable because they're everywhere. Human time is still the most premium commodity that we have to sell.
If you're enjoying this conversation with Michael Thomsen of Origin 84, be sure to join us next week for part 2 and the conclusion of our discussion. We'd like to thank Michael for joining us, and we truly appreciate all of you for tuning in.
Of customers of all kinds.
Am I on the cloud?
Joe spins his deeply detailed yarns all the time.
I have a whole story about this.
Sam is on the road again, phoning in from a hotel.
At least we know where I am.
Half a century combined of Apple expertise right now. Right now. My Mac is slow. Have you tried restarting? Well, the fans won't blow. Have you tried restarting? But my data is gone. Have you tried restarting? I dropped it